saw that you're teaching a class, maybe a couple weeks into a class with the Berry Center. It's Plants and Us, Consciously Rerouting in the Web of Life. It sounds like a wonderful course.
Yeah, I'm teaching that together with Karin Myers, who is a Buddhist scholar, and she's bringing more like the background about different views on plant life. Are plants sentient beings or not, and all of those discussions, over the centuries. And I bring in guided meditations on, developing the capacity to sense into plant life and what they have to tell us or teach us. So we are combining a scholarly approach with an embodied approach. And then there's also, breakout groups for people to exchange about their experience, and then harvesting, and we do a little bit of chanting, and it's a very beautiful mix, and takes about 2 hours, and then people get a little homework at the end, and it's opening up something rather new in Buddhism, because I think the Buddhist core teachings come to us from Iron Age India, and at that time the social situation was very different than today, of course, and there was no understanding of the limitations of the biosphere, and that human beings could actually upset the balance to the degree we have already been doing, and it's continuing, of course. We can't really turn it around in a short time. So, bringing this teaching in a different framework, which is in particular focusing on the impending climate collapse if we don't manage to turn things around, and expanding perception in a way so we starting to open up to the possibility that we can learn from other species, such as plants and trees, who are much older than us, because human beings are considered the youngest species and have very little experience about adaptation and about dealing with difficult limitations. And I think we could definitely learn from those beings which actually can't move away from any kind of limitations or danger, but had to learn to develop the capacity to adapt. And I think that's why that's a very interesting field. And I think there's a lot going on, different people, bringing in different ways of learning from the modern human world. And that's just one contribution. And I have also done something at Spirit Rock a few months earlier, and I think I'm going to continue in that way. And I'm also continue to learn, I'm also taking trainings, and I've in particular learned from the Pachamama Alliance, who is actually located in San Francisco as well, and learning, from indigenous people, different teachers and also, shamanic teachers, and reading also quite a lot. In particular, I feel very inspired by David Abram, who wrote 2 very powerful books. One is called The Spell of the Senses, and the other one is Becoming Animal. And also, if you have heard about Bayo Akomolafe, maybe, a Nigerian psychologist and trickster, as he calls himself. I've learned from him also a lot, and synthesizing all of that with the core Buddhist teaching, which I have been studying and practicing for over 30 years.
Wow.
So what I'm particularly interested is, taking the timeless core teachings and integrating them with a more contemporary framework. That's what interests me the most. And, that's what I'm, doing also with the Aloka Earth Room, which is basically an expression or a symbol of that attempt, to help spread the word, that we are actually not separate from the earth, but we live inside the earth, and we are basically, to speak with Bayar secretions of the earth herself. And if we remember and if we have the right intention and attention, I think we can reconnect with that self-regenerative intelligence of the earth as a living being. And that's, what I'm involved in, you could say. And the Earth Room is my base where I live and where I sit right now, and where I teach and also develop my different new approaches. I'm just here for 1.5 years, so I quite recently left my community in order, to have the environment so I can do something on my own and start a new little path for myself. And yeah, in May it's going to be 2 years that the Aloka Earth Room has opened. And that was about my idea, to be on my own for about 2 years. And then I have started investigations to maybe join a community again. And I'm going to go in a few days. I'm leaving actually for the East Coast and have some meetings and looking, how that could possibly, roll out or not. I will see.
Oh, wow. How, wow. I mean, there's so much that I want to dive right into. And that is it's an amazing project that you're working on, just in general, like the more broad stroke of it, that you have this kind of I believe on the website it says something about like eco dharma or something like that. It has like this environmental component, earth recognition, and earth health component to what the Aloka Earth Room does, and also to what you as just an individual is doing as you teach courses or classes at different institutions and different programs, where you are trying to present these core components of Buddhism into a contemporary context, and that context speaking to a really important need, which is to address climate change and to make sure that we can all recognize in ourselves something that I really appreciated how you phrased it, where it's like we are in the earth, or we are like of the earth. And I think that, us being a brand new species, we're certainly acting like it. And we just think that because we walk on top of the earth and build things on top of it, that we're somehow separate from it, and that we're not actually fully reliant or fully within it at all times. And that this is in fact a living being or a living thing that
A being, yeah.
Yeah. And that we are our actions have consequences for better and for worse. And right now we're seeing what all the worse actions have been doing. And no, so I think it's a really wonderful thing that you're doing. And has this environmental component to your practice and to your teaching, has that always been a core component for you, or is that something that developed as you started to get more into your path?
I would call it, number one, it's not an environmental, it's a little bit kind of a weak word here, but call it like ecological, And also, I don't use the word eco-dharma very much, because I feel like the word eco-dharma is like, that these questions are like a little part of the Dharma, because in a way for me, it's, it's all about the Dharma actually, by, noticing how we are, through our ignorance, really kind of cutting ourselves off more and more from the flow of life. And, the root of the word Dharma is dar, and that means actually to support and be supported, both, at the same time. And then also sometimes the word Dharma is translated as nature, for example, or simply it's used also to describe, that's the teachings of the Buddha. But originally it means the root is to support and be supported. And that's exactly what's happening in a biosphere, that every little component is supported, but also supports. And in that way, you know, it is not a sidekick of the Dharma, but it's like right and center. The planet and what's happening is expressing the Dharma, just like everything else is expressing the Dharma. So I don't use, before I called it eco-Dharma, but I don't do that anymore. I call it ecology and Dharma because I feel that's more accurate. And now I forgot your question. The other question.
Has the ecological component that you're investing in and that you're focusing on, has that always been a concern or a passion for you as you've been walking your path? I mean, have these type of ecological issues, or even just the study and awareness of it, has that always been important for you from the beginning, or is that something that you kind of have been learning more about as more studies have been coming to the mainstream?
I think, number one is I started my training in Thailand, and then went to England and lived for like about 15 years in an international monastery. And that were both monasteries were in what's called the Thai forest tradition. So, from the very beginning, I was in a tradition which was very close to nature, and the forest was always spoken about as somebody who can teach you the Dharma. And over the last weekend, I have been with a friend just very recently at a old growth forest near Independence Lake in the northern Sierras. And, that's a forest which has come up after the Ice Age, after the glaciers melted, and nobody has ever, cut anything in that forest or moved anything around. There were no paths. And I had a very experienced friend, and she took me into that forest, and we stayed overnight outside one night. And I could really so powerfully see how the forest is teaching impermanence, how the forest is teaching not self. It was incredible because I could see, trees from really tiny, tiny trees to huge trees who falling over, and then starting to compose into the ground. And then after some time, there's nothing left, a very tiny feeling, that it's very soft and bouncy, and, there's a dead tree underneath. So the forest is really able to teach the Dhamma. And it had such an amazing depths to it, So because I'm from the forest tradition originally, I think I was always somehow, noticing that for sure. And before, I became a nun, I studied cultural anthropology, social anthropology. And I remember when I was about, in my mid-teens, I was with my parents on a photo safari in East Africa. And it deeply hit me at that time, when I saw some of the indigenous people there, that the way they were walking, that they were living, that they had a connection, to the earth, which we had lost. And I felt like I just want to stay there. I don't want to go back into the minibus and drive on to the next hotel. I felt such a sense of grief almost, and at the same time a great inspiration, that there was something I was really deeply interested in. And then, I went to university in Vienna and studied cultural anthropology. But then, I got pretty soon quite disappointed because that wasn't what was taught there, of course. There was taught the history of anthropology and, the comparisons made between different ways of doing things and so on. And it wasn't that what I was looking for, And then at one point I met my first teacher. And then when I saw him, I felt like there was a similar depth to his presence. And that's how it started, really.
And
and this was a forest, and he was a forest monk, quite a senior, in his mid-80s, forest monk in the jungle of South Thailand, about 4 hours north of the Malaysian border.
Wow.
Near Suratani, And there's these very famous islands there where lots of people might have been, on holidays. Koh Samui, it's Koh Samui, that port, it was maybe like 1.5 hours away from that monastery.
Wow. And when you were meeting with that teacher and you saw this kind of awareness within the teacher of that you had seen before on that trip with your family, where you saw someone kind of more or less aware and integrated into the natural world and more so participating in it rather than someone that pretends to observe from it, or someone that is more socially distanced from that a very intimate relationship with it. And what was your experience like? Did you live in Thailand? Did you do monastic training in Thailand?
I mean, I lived about 6 years in Thailand, and with different monasteries in the south first with my first teacher, who was already in his mid-80s and then actually passed away. And then I started my training in England in an international forest monastery called Amaravati Buddhist Monastery near London. That's where I started, as a postulant in 93. And then after 2 years, I went on the road again, as a postulant, accompanying a senior nun to Australia and Thailand. And then I visited some of the monasteries of that lineage in Thailand and lived with the nuns there. And so altogether, I lived about 6 years in Thailand. And then I returned to England and took the next level of ordination and stayed there till about 2009. And that's when I came over here to America and together with a colleague, and we started a small monastery in the Sunset District on 48th Avenue, close to the beach.
Yeah.
Between Lawton and Moraga, and we were there. It was called Aloka Vihara. We were there from 2009 till 2014, and then we moved that little monastery out into the Sierra foothills near Placerville, and then we were there, the Aloka Vihara Forest Monastery, from 2014 to 2023. And then, we had 2023, at the beginning of 2023, the place was sold because we almost, we had difficulty with the fires, and it took a lot of working power, to keep it all going. And we felt it was not sustainable for us. So we decided to sell the place. And then I came here and started with the Aloka Earth Room.
And what a expansive and international experience that you had as you were moving from different countries and in vastly different settings. I mean, you were in forest, Thai forest monasteries, and then you'd go to London and Australia, and then you'd come to America and you'd go to the Sierra foothills and the Sunset District of San Francisco. And a lot of these are very different environments, like ecological settings. And now you're based still in the Bay Area, but San Rafael. And how is that for you? Like, do you feel when you are among trees and then you're in a little bit further away from where street lights are and where cell reception is and all that kind of stuff, do you feel like you can engage with that intimacy of nature that you've been kind of drawn towards? Or do you feel like, well, that connection can be sustained and felt in the business parks of America or in the more urban settings?
I think it can be done everywhere, and that's also why I came now to San Rafael, because I want to be a little bit closer to what's called the marketplace, and still, of course, to venture out into the country from time to time is great. I've just been, at this old growth forest, But, you know, it's just a 4-hour drive, really. And then, of course, we needed to walk because there were no roads. But it doesn't necessarily need a lot of time, you know. So, because I feel there's lots of people in the urban areas, you know, who maybe can't go there or don't have the time or the means, you know. So I think it's also important to bring all of that to the city. And, you know, I teach guided meditations about communing with a plant ally, where you can have a potted plant and do that, you know. You don't necessarily need, of course, it's more maybe powerful in a huge forest, but you have to just work with what you have got, you know. Yeah. And, you know, and maybe what I want to mention, another really, you know, powerful influence was I had also a teacher. So the first tradition which I started was the Theravada tradition of Southeast Asia. But I also had a teacher in the Vajrayana tradition, and who was based, you know, in Bhutan and in Nepal. And I spent, you know, several visits at his monastery in Kathmandu, in Bauda, in the Tibetan district of Kathmandu. That was also extremely important influence. You know, the Vajrayana tradition works a lot with ritual and music and costume, dance, and all of those things, because that's also part of my background. I was in avant-garde dance theater, you know, at the same time when I studied cultural anthropology. And so, you know, I have that leaning towards, let's say, you know, different kinds of communicating the teaching, not necessarily through language, you know. And that's also an influence from my first teacher, the Thai forest master, Ajahn Buddhadasa, who also used art as a teaching tool. And in his monastery there, you know, north of the Malaysian border, he had an art gallery, which was called the Spiritual Theater, where there were mainly paintings, you know, which were used as a teaching tool. So, you know, that bringing together of art, ecology, and Buddhism, that's really what the Aloka Earth Room is all about.
Yeah, I was going to say, because and this is something that I wanted to get into. I've seen some pictures of the Aloka Earth Room, and you have some really beautiful art, and it's very unique styling. There's like right behind you, there's these pointillist kind of constellation elements that are behind you, and then I know there's a sculpture. I'm not sure who it's of, but there's also a kind of a standing painted portrait of someone also in a kind of a constellation.
Yeah. An Aborigine painting is that, actually, from Australia. And over there, that's not the Prajna Paramita, you know, the mother of wisdom, or the personification of emptiness. So, you know, those elements, and then also a classic Theravadan Buddha from Burma here, made out of white marble. So it's, you know, bringing in the indigenous wisdom and the Buddhist core teaching. And then the room itself, it's, you know, it looks like constellations. It could also be eyes. It could be amoebas. It could be boats who take you to the other shore. You know, it's like you can't really land on one thing. And that's exactly the way of working with the mind, I think, which is important now, you know, to help the mind to be with the not knowing, you know, and support the emergence of something new, you know, as we are seeing so many old assumptions falling apart and die, and not being, you know, too quickly to decide what the next thing is going to be. And that requires patience and also a lot of courage, you know, and that's what I'd like to kind of support with this pointillist, you know, paintings. And it was actually designed by a friend of mine, an artist from Vienna, who made the design, you know, for the paintings. I executed it together with some friends, but it was her design. Her name is Barbara Veras, and she sent me all of the, you know, the layout on on slides, and they were projected onto the walls, and the walls are painted with, handmade clay paint. So it has a particular atmosphere, yeah, which is, quite refreshing and different from all other, places. It's more like an art installation. You go inside, and then it's used for meditation and teaching, and just as a space holder, also for me, because it inspires me, to be, that's where I live. It's my living room, basically, It's a very small house with just, the living room was converted into the Earth Room. And then there's 2 rooms, one for me and one for my a colleague, who lives with me. And the small courtyard where I also sometimes teach, there's some plants out there, 3 or 2. And that's basically the incubator, for the idea. And as I get more stable and more connected with this, I'm now in the process of finding the next location, because I'd like to integrate it in a bigger organization. And discussions have started with a particular monastery on the East Coast, but it's not yet ripe to speak about it much.
Yeah. I mean, it is such a boy. I could talk about this for a long time, but it really is amazing how you have cultivated this space, and then you had mentioned the elements that you've brought into the design of the Earth Room, of the Aloka Earth Room, and how it's not just paint, it's clay. There's like a clay earth component that's put onto it, and then it's designed by a friend of yours from Vienna, and yet the design happened from that artist's mind, and then it was brought to your community through slides, and it was projected using light onto the wall, and the community came together and actually put it together. And there is that fluidity with the design, which allows for this opportunity that, and I wanted to ask you about this, like that allows for somebody to have to be with not knowing. And that is such a difficult task for a lot of people, and it turns a lot of people off from avant-garde art or abstract art or things that they walk right by a gallery for. There's like, it's not, that's for the people that are fancy, that understand fancy things, and it's like, I can't. That's not for my mind. And what's something that you say to somebody, as someone that is an artist, and that is somebody that is also someone that is well versed in Buddhism and the teachings of Buddhism? What do you say to somebody who is a little bit reluctant, a little bit on the fence about diving into some concepts, or to being with this unknown, and how you can kind of guide someone to be okay with that, and to get the courage to be there and feel safe there?
Yeah, I mean, it's a lifelong training, I think, and it isn't about, not feeling uncomfortable, or not feeling anxious, or, not wanting to grab and so on. But that can be seen more clearly, It's like holding up a mirror, and the Buddhist teaching is about, observing how the mind is scrambling and, trying to grab something, and becoming more okay with that, and not needing it to be any different. I think it's not about changing your experience, but it's more getting to know, how the mind tries to desperately make sense out of everything, and this desperation to make sense then, tends to create a lot of havoc, really, filling in the holes where we don't know, and just trying to pin something down just for having something, and to learn that this is actually not serving us, but it keeps us stuck in very early patterning, and it's a repetition compulsion, which is going on and on and on, and to develop the spaciousness so we can digest and metabolize this need, but not with shutting it down, but with kindness, you know, and a willingness to sense and feel what that need, you know, the desperation does to us, and then making friends with that, and slowly it starts to be digested and integrated, you know, and then we have more and more capacity to be in that openness, you know, and see what emerges without pinning it down too early, you know, and making a lot of havoc in that way. You know, because really we don't know as much as we think we do know. And, you know, I think the climate crisis shows us that, you know, because I don't think that there were any bad intentions, but there's just so much ignorance, you know. So, you know, the desperate need to be in control, to get to know this and wean ourselves off it, because it doesn't really do us so much good as we can see, you know. So it's about, you know, if I may say, it's about, like, you know, human supremacy, to understand that we need to give that up, you know, for our own good and for the good of many other species as well. It's just not going to work, you know. It's just like an old paradigm which is obviously dying. And it's about, I feel, hospicing this dying in a way, you know, which is bring the patience and the kindness to the dying process of the old, and having the capacity, you know, to support the midwifing of the new without suffocating it with our expectations, you know. There's a very powerful book by someone called Vanessa Andreotti. She wrote a book which is called Hospicing Maternity. I warmly recommend that to people, you know, besides those two books by David Abraham, which I also suggested, and by Akumulafe. I think those are really powerful supports in trying to make sense of what is upon us, you know, at this time.
Especially within anyone's lifetime, right? I mean, there's a beginning to the lifetime, and then there's an end to the lifetime. And even if you are skeptical of climate health and the climate issues that are going on right now, the impending destruction of what we know as climate today, if you are, you know, reluctant to believe in that, you know, you have your own lifetime to also worry about too, and to start I guess accepting, or to start processing, you know, however that goes, you know, processing the grief, the loss, and I think that those resources sound like they help with that. And I liked your use of the word desperation when it comes to this being with the unknown. It's like, well, when there's an unknown, there is this desperation, there is this like clinging of like, well, I need to fill this with something, because it can't just be something that I don't know, or it can't just be a void that's not helping my rational mind get rest at night. You know, it's not comforting to me. And approaching that desperation with kindness and an invitation to kind of relish and just kind of be in that state, and just recognize it for what it is. And yeah, and I think also too that hospice theme, or that way, that concept, applying it to the climate crisis is a really apt. I haven't considered it before. I feel like it's very apt to apply hospice care to what's going on right now, where we are watching something kind of go through a death, and hopefully it doesn't come all the way to that terminal issue.
You know, end. I mean, yeah. I don't mean, you know, death of the planet, because the planet can't be really destroyed by any one species, but it's more death, I think, of our own grandiosity, you know, and our own ideas about what civilization is all about. You know, I think it's and if we are not willing to let go of that approach, the only thing what's going to happen is that our species is going to go extinct, at least for some time, you know, and with that also many other species. So the planet will continue for a long time, you know, until maybe the sun explodes in a few million years, billion years even. it's really not, the planet itself cannot be destroyed by us. It's just about ourselves, you know. And I see it more as a responsibility, you know, for future generations to do what we can to preserve that biosphere, you know, so that people can live here. And it's just decent behavior, you know. If you're going to a room, when you leave the room, you leave it maybe even better than you found it. I mean, that's just like normal, you know. I mean, if normal is maybe not a good word, but that's how I was brought up by my parents. That's how I was trained in a monastery. That's just like decent behavior, you know. So this, you know, like many indigenous cultures live and practice in this way, you know, 7 generations. To when you make a decision, you always think about the repercussions for 7 generations, not just about, you know, for me, and then I die and I don't care. And in Buddhism anyway, you know, we have the concept of rebirth, and there's no escape, you know, from this. You'll come back, even if you know, kind of end your life. There's no guarantee that you're not going to be coming back to this planet again.
Yeah, there's and you might as well in this life take care of yourself the best you can, and then also leave it better for the next person that inherits it, which could be yourself. You know, it could be yourself coming back to
In
this
a way,
thing. Yeah.
metaphorically speaking, yeah.
Yeah. And yeah, and that adage too of you know, leaving something better than when you got there first, or I forget exactly how it goes, but that's also a camping adage too. I mean, it's like you go there and you make sure that you properly put out the fire, you soak it, and you do these things, and then you pick up all your trash, and then maybe if there was trash there before you got there, you pick up that trash too, and you make it so that nature can be enjoyed by itself, but also by who else decides to be in that spot. And
Very well said, yeah.
Yeah, and I when it comes to the indigenous cultures that you draw inspiration from, as far as like the teachings and the lessons and the shamans that you're reading from and things like that, it feels like the Aboriginal indigenous culture of Australia is something that is, you know, has a presence in the Earth Room. It has in the Aloka Earth Room, and I was curious what if there's a particular quality about that culture, or if there's a specific tribe that indigenous culture that you draw inspiration from and get the most out of, that can kind of coexist with a lot of the Buddhist core teachings.
It's not a particular tribe or culture, I must admit, but this painting, you know, came to me through an artist, and a friend of mine had a book of this artist who is also an anthropologist, and I must admit I forgot his name right now. The book is just out there, but I can't reach it. And you know, he made photos of some of the people in Central Australia. I think they were Piri. And then he brought back those developed photos and asked them, you know, to paint over the photos in their particular style. And I think it's maybe even the person on the photo which painted over the photo. And then I asked his permission, you know, to enlarge it. And that's that person here. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
But I think, you know, all indigenous people, you know, have that deep connection to the earth. And I think that the Australian Aboriginal cultures and nations, I mean, they are just very, very ancient. And I think, you know, their painting style has just really spread around the whole world. You know, many people feel fascinated by that approach because it's really powerful. And it just made its way in here, you know. Yeah.
And that has its own significance too, of just kind of like, well, I allowed this spontaneous connection to manifest, and now it is where it is, and it's imbuing that the very clay and the
yeah, it's feel. Just next. It's actually here, you know. I mean,
oh yeah, wow.
Next to me.
Yeah, beautiful. And it's
Yeah.
so great that the person featured in the portrait is also the person that added to the artistic elements of
Yes.
it.
Yeah.
And for your own artistic journey and the way that you've expressed it and connected to it, did you find that when you were approaching avant-garde theater as a costume designer and also maybe as a dancer, is that right? You did dance as well.
Yeah.
Did you find that there were components to that pursuit that had a grounding in something spiritual, something sacred, or even to get more specific, something Buddhist when you were doing that, and then kind of built on that as you walked your path?
I mean, I wouldn't say Buddhist, but it was definitely, it has definitely spiritual components to it. And it was also, it was the ensemble. We were creating the pieces together. So it was a very intimate kind of a group work and very spontaneous and emergent, That word is used these days a lot, but actually we did that that's now like, 40 years ago in Vienna. It was a very emergent process, and I wasn't even aware of it then in those terms, So it was a very great opportunity, to experience that, and it really, gave me a very good tune up, to then when the time came, to leave that behind. That was a great training for me.
Because you had been in a kind of a community, had that exploration of spontaneous
Creation.
creation, and then you go into other kind of communities where you're recognizing that, and I really that I'm very grateful that you shared that root definition of dharma as something that's like to support and supporting. I think that's like that it's such a powerful interpretation and understanding, and it says a lot. And so I'd imagine that bringing that into an approach to your life in living in monasteries has been very impactful. It's certainly making an impact just as I hear it. And when you lived in monasteries all over the world, or like engaged with these communities and have built them yourself, like some of these communities that you've lived with colleagues or other monastics, and what what um what has the experience been like to kind of go into a community that's already established and versus kind of building something of your own and having to maybe restart or whatever it is, but like that sense of more of a greater leadership role in the building of it and the founding of something versus kind of walking into something that's more or less been there for that precedes you.
Yeah, I think it's it's like a learning process. In the beginning, when I started, I lived in a quite large community, about 50 monastics, that monastery north of London, and lots of visitors and people from all countries, So that was a great time of not having much responsibility and being really able to be carried, by the mothership, and having the opportunity to absorb the teachings and learn a lot of things. And then I also lived sometimes in very small communities in England, but always, connected to the mothership, basically. And then when we came over here, me and a colleague, in 2009, we started a community ourselves, and then that was really not easy, and now I really appreciate community as a very important part of the path. That Sangha is like contemplated as the third refuge in Buddhism, because it's just really a very important support. And it can also become, a confinement. And it's an art in itself, to know when it's time to move on and to know when it's time to persevere, And that's something we learn, by trial and error, and learn also, by having elders who can help. And it's an ongoing theme, in community. And yes. So, I have now lived on my own for 2 years since I left my community again. It was a smaller community of nuns, but we were about like 7 nuns, 6 nuns, and some lay people, in that forest monastery in the Sierra foothills. And now I'm considering to go back into community because I feel like, I feel called back again, and I just trust that guidance,
Mm. Mm.
Mm-hmm.
As you pursue that connection, or like as you start to like make build some groundwork around that feeling, that guidance that you're feeling, what are some things that you are right now in this time looking for in the next community? Is it something that you are looking to be around people with more of an ecological component to their, like a more forward and communicative and uh, direct exchange with the more the larger community around them that's not necessarily monastic? Or are you looking for something that is different in another way that's kind of pulling you stronger?
I think it's number one, it's, I want to, be with some younger people because I'm coming into the age of being an elder, and I'd like to share what I've learned, and support younger people in building a community by offering maybe some stability and experience. And at the same time, also, integrating the earth-based teachings more into mainstream Buddhism. And, offering, basically a portal into that way of looking at the teaching, and no longer, just like tucked away in a small dead end road in San Rafael, but being more like, in a bigger monastery, being part of that setting. And, like some of the big churches, they have side chapels, like a side chapel to Mother Mary or to a saint. So I see it like that, I would like to integrate like a side chapel to the earth, and then if people are coming, that they have this slowly, kind of get interested in something new, which is part of something which is already going. And I think that's the next step for the Earth Room, to come out from this little incubator situation, which was very important in the beginning, and now gonna be a side chapel to something bigger. And then who knows what comes next? I don't know right now, but I allow the Earth Room, to just guide me. And that's what's it feels the right next step.
Yeah, and it really is it's such a unique uh like a construction. It's like such a unique way of building a sacred space. And I do hope that where you land next, you're able to kind of have that side chapel and build like an earth room that you can continue this work in. And as far as just like design elements, like if you were to have a lot of resources and design creative control over what another iteration of an earth room might look like, have you thought about like what you'd
Yeah,
want to?
I've started thinking about it, and I might work actually with a Latina Filipina artist who lives actually in San Francisco. So we've started talking about it, and it's gonna be again like a cave-like presence, and I'm not, you know, I've started thinking about it, but it's not really time yet to speak because I need to see the space, you know, because the space will also tell me what's right. But it's definitely going to be clay paint again, you know, and maybe a bit more, because this is just a living room in a house, you know, I had only so much permission to change the room, but I would like to have everything much more round, you know, when I start again. You know, the ceiling also not like the ceiling here is like just like a box, you know, but I would like it round. So I need to see, you know, how it's what possibilities emerge. But I am quite I see there will be good opportunities. I think that it is time for this, you know, to find expression, because I think, you know, it would be a good thing if different earth rooms would be, you know, in many places, and people can make it their own. You know, it doesn't need to be in a way I'm doing it, but just to have a gathering place for considering those questions, you know, and opening to the guidance of the earth, I think, which is totally there. You know, we just need to ask. It really is there. Because, you know, the earth is really using those who can hear as an immune system, you know, for meeting the illness, you know, which is definitely there. You know, we can see the warming is like the, you know, when you get an infection, you get fever, right? And we need gathering places, and we need to speak about it, and we need to inspire each other, you know, by confirming we are not crazy if we say that the earth is speaking to us. It's really happening. She's shouting at us, you know, because we are in danger. And we are pretty foolish, you know, we are pretty foolish and immature. We are like little kids, you know, and we need to stop and listen. And I think the Buddhist teaching, you know, have the capacity to give us practical instructions how to work with our minds and with our emotions and with feelings and all of that. And once that is understood, and there's also other teachings, you know, who do that. And then once we have a capacity to get a bit of a handle on our thoughts and on our emotions, then we can step into and volunteer, you know, to be part of the immune system, to be used like an antenna, you know, basically, who receives the guidance. And to understand that human supremacy is never going to work, you know. It's never going to work. It's stupid. You know, like just white supremacy, you know, it's not working. It's not working. And human supremacy is not working too, because the whole supremacy thing is just like it's part of patriarchy, you know, and it's on the way out. It must go away.
It is. I feel like a supremacy. I mean, and just like what we've been talking about a lot, it's like it in its own nature, like that supremacy is something that is distinguishing something as better or above something else. And well, if we're all part of this living being that is Earth, there can't be, everything has its value and is supported and supports.
Yeah, itself. Like the dharma, you know.
Yeah, and yeah, I think that's an absolutely important thing, and the phrasing that you have with you know, being called to join this immune system and to act on behalf of the earth in its own way as a as an immune system addressing the illness and meeting it. I think that's a really wonderful way of understanding what you're saying, and yeah, I think it's such important work. And just like briefly, like what would you like to somebody who is uh not necessarily against this idea that there is climate change or that they're against anything in particular, but they're more just sedentary. They're just more or less content in their illusion, and they're just kind of letting this whole conversation and this whole opportunity to change go right by, and they're not really wanting to be engaged or kind of to, so to speak, get off the couch to do something about it. What is something that you would say to inspire somebody who more or less is content right now with the way things are?
I don't think there's many people who are content. I think there's a lot of depression, drug abuse, addiction. I don't think there's many people content, actually. So it's just you know, the earth really reaching out to us and you know, trying to wake us up. And I think it's more like, you know, reaching out and finding somewhere to start, you know, and because, you know, by turning away from what's happening, that's not going to work, you know. And you know, and I think that the dependence on consuming and on medications and all of that, you know, is just like showing us, you know, that so many people are actually not content, you know, and they are distracting themselves just, you know, a lot. And I would say, you know, to really for somebody who isn't quite sure, you know, what to do, to first really observe and see, you know, how many hours a day are they distracting themselves with their phones, you know, with getting absorbed into the virtual reality in many ways. And then, you know, really see, you know, where is that leading, you know, where is that leading? And also, you know, feeling with the responsibility for future generations. I think which we all have, you know, that this gift which we have received from our ancestors, you know, these very complex bodies. And, you know, we are part of the lineage, you know, where life has, you know, is existing on this planet for about 4 billion years, you know, and to really take that in, you know, what a amazing situation that actually is, you know, and we can be part of that chain of life. And to really, you know, turn off the TV and tune into that, because this is much more interesting, you know.
To participate in that multi-billion year lineage
Project.
Yeah, no, it really is so special. And we went from being tadpole-like things in an ocean to wearing socks and, you know, going on runs and stuff like that. And yeah, so there's really, really wonderful things to hear. And I just
have expanding perception, you know, that's a way, you know, expanding perception and taking that in, how much bigger, you know, what we are taking part is such the vast web of life, and it's so awesome, you know, really.
Yeah, and awesome in all of its ways. Like, it has its intensities, it has its intimacies, it has its small acts of kindness, it has its huge, you know, destructive tendencies, it has everything. It's this amazing thing that we get to participate in and see and observe too. I had just one more question for you. And before that, though, I did want to mention, because you had talked about how you'd like to see more things like the Earth Room, and I wanted to share. It's not the same thing really at all, but it is interesting. There's something in New York City, and it's through the Dia Art Foundation. And
I know that Earth Room. Yeah.
Oh yeah. Okay, great.
Yeah.
Well, for anyone that's listening that's not familiar, there is a loft on Prince Street or something like that in Soho of New York City and of Manhattan, and it is filled with maybe 2.5 to 3 feet of dirt, and that's what it is. And you go up there, and it smells like dirt, and that's it. And
have you been there?
I have, yeah, many times. I actually really like to go. going there. You can't walk around on it, but you can go and you can look at it. And it's just such a, just to have in one of the busiest cities in the world, to have just a space that is just filled with dirt. It's just, there's a lot to it, it feels like.
Yeah.
Did you like visiting it? Have you
You
been
know,
there?
I haven't visited yet, but when I decided for my name, I was looking for a URL, and then I saw, oh, the Earth Room, and so then I added the name Aloka because that was the monastery I came from. And I definitely, when I go to the East Coast, I want to visit and maybe in some way, maybe affiliate, in some way, maybe do something, make myself, introduce myself there,
Yeah. Oh
Yeah.
yeah. I could absolutely see the Dia Foundation, I think, appreciating what you're doing in San Rafael, and wherever you go next, having an interest in what you're doing. I think that'd be a really wonderful thing.
Yeah.
And then for my last question, is there anything that you would like to promote? I don't know if there's something that you're working on, a class that's coming up, a project that you're working on, or a cause or a foundation that you're familiar with that you would like to have more attention brought to, or if there's anything advice-wise that you'd want to give to somebody along the Buddhist path that you would have wanted to have heard at that point.
I mean, in terms of, opportunity, I teach every Wednesday morning from 9 to 10 Pacific time, an online session which is called Earthworm Practice for the Anthropocene. And if you like, I could put the link into the chat. Would that be a good idea?
Sure, that'd be great.
That would be my invitation if anyone would like to, get a taste of the teachings. And people don't necessarily need to know anything about Buddhism in order to do that. So I'm going to put in the link into the chat.
Great. Take a look at that.
So, and this is the first thing. And then I also teach, retreats and on the East Coast and on the West Coast at different venues, and also in Washington. And I'm also going to put in that link with all my retreats and other teachings also online, which are not, from the Earth Room, but where I teach at different venues.
Perfect.
That's going to be the next.
Oh yeah, there it is. Perfect. Here, I'm going to take a quick.
And I'm happy to invite people to join, for the Wednesday sessions, and or meet me in one of the other event venues, online and in person. And in terms of, little, you were thinking, what I would have liked have heard, on as a support for the path. I think, don't be afraid of your mind. Really go and find a teaching which can show you how to approach your mind so that you can train it. And there's many teachings out there, and the Buddhist teaching is just one of them. And it's very pragmatic, because the Buddhist meditation teaching is very clear, I think. But it doesn't necessarily need to be Buddhism at all, but just one kind of a teaching so that we have the capacity, to turn towards the mind. Because if you let the mind run wild, it's a real problem, And it will become more so a problem, as we getting more challenged through whatever, is going to emerge from the polarization, which is becoming more and more, and the pressure of the climate crisis will also intensify all of that, And we need to really have tools to work with our minds. Otherwise, it's just very, very hard,
Absolutely. I feel like that chatter that continues in your mind, if you don't address it, it leads to so much suffering. And then if you're having a hard time in your own self, then it can grow and it can percolate and it can go into other avenues of your life and affect the whole society at large. I mean, it could start the change for the better cannot just start with you, but when you address that, it can really blossom into something that can help others. Well, Ayya Santacitta, thank you so much for speaking with me today. I really appreciate you taking the time and for sharing so much. There's so much to learn, and there's so much to continue to learn from you. And I will definitely uh, post those links to the description for where this will be posted as a podcast. And and as you go on to this next community, wherever you find yourself, I do hope that you are able to manifest this Earth Room in the way that you wish, in the way that that excites you, but also helps share this really important message that you're doing, where you are speaking to ecology and Buddhism. It's a really wonderful project, and thank you so much.
Thank you.